August, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm tremendously honored to be standing here in front of so many international scholars, musicians, composers and directors. From the program I learned that people come from Russia, from the UK, from the US and of course from Amsterdam, whose special position in the work and the reception of Oestvolskaja will be elucidated in, well, about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I think. As you all know, it's always very hard as an administrator to say something useful, and I'm not even going to try. But what struck me is that today's symposium is really an overture to a long festival, and this overture is all devoted to one central human activity, one that is very dear to me, but one that's also very tiresome, and that is interpretation. And what I can be very jealous of, being a cultural historian, is that this interpretation in this symposium is twofold. There will be people who will be interpreting the work of Oestvolskaja by performing it, and so to speak, by letting it speak for itself, but not entirely for itself. And then there will be the typical humanities activity of interpreting the work in terms of making statements about the work of Oestvolskaja in relation to various important parameters, like the style of Oestvolskaja, minimalism or maximalism. I sing in a sextet myself, and we never get beyond Bird and Palestrina, but we did a little vote last night on whether Oestvolskaja is a minimalist or a maximalist, and it was unanimous against her minimalism. And we have all kinds of good arguments for that. One is the hyperbolic dimension, which will be addressed today, but I'm sure that the next speaker will be very, very pleased to disagree with our unanimous vote last night by people who never went beyond. I think Zwiep is the most recent thing we ever sang. Another important parameter, which in the light of the geographical and political location of Oestvolskaja is very intriguing, is the parameter of religion and devotion, which will be addressed by two speakers today. Another important one is the performers, the people who will teach others to perform Oestvolskaja, and of course also the audience and the journalistic reception of Oestvolskaja. So from my perspective as a research director of an institute that's very, very interdisciplinary, this is truly an exemplary symposium. And I realize that interdisciplinarity is a buzzword which administrators repeat and repeat ad nauseam, and very gratuitous. Today it is true in a sense that is very, very dear to me. I borrowed this from Paul Ricoeur, who says true interdisciplinarity is not about working together for the sake of administration and funding, but it is for the sake of answering questions that cannot be answered from one perspective or one discipline only. It's questions that you can't address just on your own. And that's what you're going to do today, I think. It's address, well, quite an intriguing question which I can't even begin to formulate, by working together, by trying to formulate an answer from different perspectives, new perspectives, I hope. The work of Oestvolskaja, I think, poses the kind of questions that you can only answer in collaboration together. And one of the things that struck me is that her personality is somehow such a complicating factor in all this. I'm trained in a post-structuralist school where the author is very, very dead and should remain dead and should be declared dead. And she takes up a very special position in this respect, because on the one hand, I quote this from the introduction, she disappears behind and even in her music, but especially by being in her music, she really always triggers you to start speculating about things which I've been trained never ever to speculate about. And this reminded me of one author from my own area of work that I've worked on quite a while ago, which posed more or less the same questions. I'm not a musicologist, so I thought, let me comment on this from my own perspective. I'm a Jewish cultural historian, and some 12 years ago we published a book on a medieval Jewish author who wrote a book which is called Sefer Sha'shu'im, which in English means Book of Delight. We know almost nothing about him. We know that he was a physician at the court of Barcelona around the year 1170, and that's what we know. And we know that he wrote this book. And we know one other thing which has a slight parallel with Oestvolskaja. He had one famous colleague. And unlike the famous colleague of Oestvolskaja, this medieval famous colleague didn't like our author. So that's a difference. So what do? You read the book. You read the Book of Delight that he wrote. This is a framing narrative where our author is very present. He speaks in this narrative in the first person singular. We know that he's called Joseph, so he's there all right. And he's invited to go on a journey through the medieval Iberian Peninsula. And throughout this journey, he talks with his companion about all kinds of things he wants to talk about. He likes to talk about medical things. So, well, this suggests that he's a physician. And, well, medieval medicine is all about what you can eat and what you can't eat. So if he would have lived today, he would have said, don't eat cucumbers, because they're lethal right now. But he talks about lettuce, wine, and meat. He tells jokes about whores and the people who visit whores. He gives all kinds of aphorisms, and he gives all kinds of popular knowledge. Now, by what he writes, we get an impression of what interests him. But many scholars have been tempted to interpret his journey as a kind of an autobiographical indication, an indication of his autobiography. Okay, he was in the peninsula. Okay, he visited Cordoba. But is it really autobiographical? Because at the end of the book, he asks his companion, could you please tell me who I had the honor of traveling with for the past 23 chapters? And the companion says, oh, I'm the 13th degree grandson of the devil. So there you go. And all the poor scholars who tried to reconstruct an autobiography in chapter 23 have to give that up. Why do I mention this? It's because where I see a parallel is this funny combination of hyperbole, not funny, intriguing combination of hyperbole and silence. Whether the silence and the hyperbole take place in medieval Cordoba or in a room in St. Petersburg, it's precisely this combination that asks or begs for interpretation. And that's what you're going to do today. You're going to interpret work that will beg for interpretation and simultaneously will endlessly defy that interpretation. I think the most quoted predicate of Oestvolskaja, and I will quote it also because it's so tremendously attractive, but it was all over the press and all over the radio the last couple of days, is the image of the lady with the hammer. And I was wondering if people who are not native speakers realize the import of that particular predicate. I don't know if other languages or English, for example, have the expression the man with the hammer. I have no idea, because I think in the light of this idea that in Dutch the expression is really the man with the hammer, this particular predicate gains enormous extra information. For one, a hammer is not a particularly female attribute. It's something that you, as a woman, you'd better not use. And what does the man with the hammer do? He gives you a blow at the moment that you're exhausted. And he gives you the kind of death blow that will stop you from going on with what you are doing. So what I do hope that this day the lady with the hammer will not, will continue to inspire and invigorate your interpretation and certainly not exhaust that activity. So I wish you all a lot of fortitude and hopefully a lot of fun as well. Thank you very much.